Hi there, this is attorney Andy Marcantel and attorney Marc J. Victor. We are the Attorneys for Freedom from the Attorneys for Freedom law firm, and we're here today to talk to you about the slap heard round the world.
Yeah, man. It was the best Oscars ever. Right?
Yeah, I mean, nobody cared about the Oscars until this moment. And
Yeah.
of course, that has started all kinds of prattle about it being a conspiracy theory. But we're going to do an analysis of this, assuming that it was authentic and it was a really intended slap, and we're not going to dive into all the conspiracy stuff.
Right.
All right. Do you want to give a recounting of the incident before we pick it apart ad nauseum?
Well, probably everybody knows about what happened here, but Chris Rock is hosting the Oscars. Chris Rock's a funny guy. He makes jokes. He says things that offend people sometimes. And so he made a joke about Will Smith's wife, who apparently has some kind of a medical condition where she loses her hair or has lost all of her hair.
Alopecia.
Yeah. And it's not clear to me whether he knew about her medical condition or not, but I think that at this moment, the preponderance of the evidence is that he did not know.
He claims that he did not know at the time.
Yeah. So I guess we should probably proceed with that in mind, that he didn't know. He thought he was making a funny joke about her starring in the next G.I. Jane movie.
G.I. Jane 2.
Yeah, G.I. Jane 2. And so apparently Will Smith didn't like this joke very much, and felt like a chivalrous guy at that moment, and decided to get up there, walk right up on stage in front of the whole world, and just slap Chris Rock right across the face.
Square in the face.
Chris Rock, I guess, maybe to his credit, I don't know. I don't know how I would have reacted at that, but didn't fight back. I think it would have been interesting if he had. Right? Had he either tried to defend himself or punched Will Smith in the face. Imagine a big, huge wrestling match up there at the Oscars. Yeah, that would have been more interesting.
Maybe G.I. Jane herself hopping up on stage and getting involved.
But that didn't happen. Chris Rock just kind of went with it and say, wow, he just slapped the you-know-what out of me, and they moved on, and Will Smith went back to his seat. I think there was a little bit of yelling after that, and a little bit of chest puffing out and those kinds of things. And then shortly after that, Will Smith is called up to the stage to receive his Oscar.
Standing ovation,
ovation
for Best Actor.
And made it clear that love makes you do some crazy things.
Yeah. So a couple of things about that. First of all, there's some speculation here. It's pretty irrelevant to the legal analysis we're about to give it, but when you said that Will Smith didn't like the joke very much, a lot of people are pointing out that he laughed initially when the joke was made.
Right.
And it wasn't until the visible displeasure of Miss Jada Pinkett that she looked kind of offended, disgusted, everything like that he changed his tone. Now, whether or not that's the case is,
kind of a red herring.
Yeah,
red herring here. Doesn't really matter.
But we're lawyers, and so let's talk about the legal aspects before we put our morality and our judgments all over it, because that's really what people are here for.
And some people are saying, look, Will Smith, good for him. He defended the honor of his wife. And
hashtag Team Will.
Yeah, he gets up there and he defended the honor of his wife and went up there and straightened out Chris Rock, and what a great guy.
Yeah, well, let's take a look at it from a legal analysis, okay? Regardless of whether you think his conduct was good or bad, he committed a crime pretty clearly under the California State Code, and that crime is misdemeanor assault. So a couple of things. First of all, assault can be either making physical contact in a harmful or offensive way with somebody, or putting them in imminent fear of making that imminent contact.
Yeah, and in some states, this particular crime is called battery instead of assault. At common law, we call this battery. Other places have sort of condensed battery into assault. But here in Arizona, where we are, there's actually 3 different ways you can commit the crime of assault. One is to intentionally or recklessly cause a physical injury to another person. Probably that's what happened here. Maybe there wasn't a physical injury. Another way is to intentionally put another person in fear of an imminent physical injury. A lot of people don't understand this version of assault, because people come into the office sometime and say, hey, Mark, I'm charged with assault, and boy, this is going to be an easy case. I never touched him. Boy, are they disappointed to hear when I say, but you don't have to touch anybody to actually commit an assault. And the third way, which is probably the most relevant variety of assault, at least here in Arizona, is simply touching another person, intentionally touching another person with the intent to either injure or insult or provoke that person. Well, he certainly touched And I think he had the intent to maybe injure or insult or provoke. I think you could probably make that case.
And the statute, very notably in California, is very, very similar. And this seems like a slam dunk interpretation of the statute for what he did. Now, it's important to note, like with everything, there are exceptions. There are some times where you are allowed to do the conduct that is prohibited in the criminal statute, but it is either justified or excused by something else. For example, self-defense. You're allowed to make harmful contact with somebody else if they're the aggressor and they initiated the contact.
Yeah, in essence, with self-defense, what you're saying is, yes, I did commit that crime, but I was justified.
It was legally justified.
And the reason I was justified is because I was defending myself. I was trying to stop somebody else from assaulting me.
So in this vein, I've seen some stuff going around online that we should go ahead and put the kibosh on right now, which is, this was provocation. There was provocation that occurred here. He said bad things about his wife who has a horrible medical condition. And he said it right there to her face in front of billions of people the planet over. That's adequate provocation. What do you have to say to that, Marc?
This is one of those places where we draw a clear line. And I'm glad we do, right? Because mere words alone, no matter how offensive the words are. And when I talk about this, I often say, even if somebody says something horrible about, your wife or your religion or your favorite sports team.
Imagine the worst possible obscenity-filled, maybe it's racist, maybe it's demeaning your sexuality.
Insert the most offensive statement you could possibly imagine. The answer back from the law is sorry. This never justifies physical force in self-defense.
We have a name for it. We call it the mere words doctrine, and it pretty clearly prohibits the conduct here.
Yeah, and if you think about it, this kind of makes sense, right? Because if you want to have a free society, people have to be free to say whatever they want. This abuts up against your right to free speech. And so it's not just speech that is inoffensive. That's not where you defend the right to free speech. Where you defend the right to free speech is exactly in the most offensive areas. So you make this statement as offensive as possible. Imagine that Chris Rock knew about the medical condition and specifically intended to insult Will Smith and his wife.
Wanted to humiliate them. Let's give him the worst possible thought process. We call it a mens rea. Let's give him the worst possible mens rea. He specifically wants to target her and humiliate her, even if that was his position. You still don't get provocation.
That's right. And if you really think about it, do we really want people slugging people because they didn't like what the other person said? So this is a bright line rule. Now, let me just add, you could insert that really offensive statement and add just a little bit of conduct, right? If Chris Rock had been making a fist and approaching Will Smith or his wife or something or somebody else and looking like he's an imminent threat to commit some kind of assault or something, then you're in a different situation. Now you have a good case for self-defense, but we don't have anything like that.
Nothing like that going on here. So a big question that a lot of people have right now, because a lot of people were rightfully perturbed by the conduct and people have lots of different concerns. Lots of people are watching this, young people who maybe idolize Will Smith and his movies as an actor and everything. They're concerned. Why isn't this guy charged with a crime? Well, really, the statement that was given was Chris Rock was given the option, would you like to press charges and immediately decline? But as it turns out, and realistically, that's not the end of the equation, really. That's not dispositive, because really the decision here is up to the local California state prosecutor in the relevant jurisdiction. That's the person who makes the charging decision here.
Yeah, people are very confused about this point. They think that whoever is the alleged victim of the crime, well, if they don't sort of press charges, well, then there's no criminal case.
Right.
The reverse is also true. Just because the victim says, I want this person charged with the crime, doesn't necessarily mean there will be criminal charges.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many cases, hundreds of cases I have had over the years in my office where the victim shows up with the client and says, I don't want charges. Maybe it's a husband and wife. Maybe it's two friends who got into a scuffle and now one of them's charged. I don't want him charged. I think he's a great guy. Why are they? I told the cops I didn't want charges. Why are they still prosecuting?
Yeah, this comes up in the domestic violence context all the time. Husband and wife, boyfriend and girlfriend get into some kind of an argument. Police are called either by one of them or maybe a neighbor. I've had that as well, and the two of them will say, look, we were just having an argument, or somebody threw the tuna casserole or something. Sometimes a prosecutor, in fact, oftentimes a prosecutor will say, sorry, we don't care. We're going to bring the charge. Now, I think you and I are both very sympathetic to the idea that if the victim, the alleged victim of the criminal act, truly, freely, voluntarily is saying, look, it's my judgment that I really don't want this person charged, the prosecutor should be more deferential to that.
Right. So we've just crossed the threshold of what the law actually is and what we think it should be, and that's an important thing to note here. But yes, I think that no victim, no crime makes a lot of sense to me. If Chris Rock truly, in an uncoerced fashion, doesn't want things to be brought, then we think that in a perfect world, that should be the end of the discussion. But a lot of times prosecutors will take it upon themselves when you have a case of high public interest, where there's a lot of people watching, to use it to make a statement to the public that says this conduct is not okay and we're going to prosecute it in a very public, high-scale way, regardless of what the victim thinks.
Yeah, plus in fairness, sometimes it can be very difficult to determine if this really is a free, voluntary decision, or if there's some aspect of coercion.
This is why we have battered spouse syndrome and things like that.
And you might expect in a situation like this, big star Will Smith, he's upset because Chris Rock says, look, I do want this guy prosecuted, and now there's this social media campaign, everybody boycott Chris Rock, and Chris Rock may have sort of succumbed to the notion that this could have happened to him. So this is why the ultimate decision isn't, at least in the law, given to the victim here. But certainly most places now are at least deferential. They say the prosecutor must consider the views of the victim.
Fair enough, yes. And at this time that we're recording this, Will Smith is not charged with a crime. The local prosecutor has not taken the initiative over the objection of the victim, in the case Chris Rock, to bring the charges. But they can up to the date of the statute of limitations, which I believe is 1 year in California for misdemeanor cases.
Yeah, and if you talk about the optics of this, right, there's a lot of optics to talk about here. The one that first comes to mind is, here's Will Smith, big, famous, powerful, rich. He's part of the privileged class. He gets to just walk up on stage and slap another guy in a completely unjustified way, and yet he escapes charges. But the typical average person does this on a regular basis, and they not only get charged, they get arrested, hauled to jail, and it's a big to-do. Why should Will Smith be treated differently than everybody else?
Yes, and a lot of people feel like he is being treated than anyone else. And I could see a local prosecutor wanting to say, we don't want to send the message that if you're rich and famous, you're above the law. Definitely. I mean, if this had occurred between two friends in a bar, this would definitely be a misdemeanor assault charge. If this had occurred between a husband and wife, if this had occurred in a public building or a private house or anything like that, and the cops were called and had reason to believe that this actually happened, I mean, what more evidence do we have other than it was filmed and released in front of billions of people the world over? Everybody who's watching, who's disturbed by this, really does feel like he is being treated differently.
Imagine two guys in the audience just watching the Oscars. One guy gets up, slaps another guy because he doesn't like what he said. Security's going to be there within seconds, and you're going to be escorted to the exit.
Cops are going to be called. You're going to be charged probably in a municipal court or something like that.
And yet Will Smith gets to sit there and enjoy the rest of the Oscars, and indeed is brought up on stage and honored.
To a standing ovation.
It does look like there's different treatment here.
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit over our skis here, but I think there's some things that we can say about the morality of the situation, maybe a little bit more analysis of it in terms of what the legal consequences could be. I thought it very interesting today. I woke up and I saw that there was a video that Jim Carrey, who's obviously an extremely famous actor and comedian, somebody who's definitely been up on stage telling jokes at the expense of the audience, said that he would have announced today, if he was in Chris Rock's position, the lawsuit he was bringing against Will Smith for $200 million because, as he said, that video's there forever. That video's there forever now. He clearly committed a crime to his great detriment. What do you think about that?
He's got to make decisions about what's in his professional interest here. I could see him losing a lot of money, too. Also, does he really have damages of $200 million? I mean, the physical damages are going to be tough to show here, I suspect. And, other damages may just be written off as sort of too speculative and that could just as easily help his career as well.
If I was on the opposite of that, if I was representing Will Smith in a defense to that, I would point out the real statistics, apparently, that Chris Rock's sales for his upcoming comedy tour have gone through the roof, and he actually financially benefited from this.
Here's $50 for the slap across the face. Leave us alone. So there's other things we need to talk about here, right? And there are some fun things to play around with if you mess around with the race and the sex of the people involved.
Yeah,
right?
that's a really important thing here, too, because this is more, now we're in the social climate, right? These are social critiques.
Right.
These aren't legal critiques, but they could translate to legal prosecution. If a prosecutor felt more strongly, for example, about the cultural implications of something, they might be more likely to charge it.
Yeah, and before you even get there is a legal point to make here, which I think that we really, for people like us who are very committed to the law, who love the law, who work on trying to get it right, I really want justice to be blind. It shouldn't matter. It shouldn't make any difference about what the sex of the people are involved, what the skin color is of the people are involved.
The political ideations.
We shouldn't matter to this. Everybody should be treated exactly the same. But you got to wonder if you start changing around the skin color and the sex, whether the public reaction goes to something akin to, we're calling for the death penalty here,
Yeah,
right?
like I imagine Chris Pratt, who's a very famous actor right now, who's kind of seen as a more conservative, maybe right-wing and ideologies and things like that, supports Republican-type stuff. Imagine if Chris Pratt walked up and decked Chris Rock in the face. I mean, I think the public would have a very different perception of what's going on now.
And Pratt's skin color is a different shade.
He's white,
He's a
right.
white guy, yeah. So how does that affect the analysis? It shouldn't affect the analysis. Also, what if you reverse that, right? You have a black guy slapping a white guy. What if you got a female on there? And so it really shouldn't be any different. Although at some point you can start making an argument that, big guy like Will Smith starts slapping little female. Now you're start talking about things like aggravated assault.
Yeah, the odds of danger, serious
Yes.
physical injury increase from a legal perspective.
Yeah, from a legal perspective. But if you keep the sizes relative and you sort of control for the possible harm that could result from the slap, you can play around with the race and the sex and see that there would be, I believe, wildly different reactions.
Yeah,
from
nobody
the public.
really is watching any other clips from the Oscars show that happened that night. But I saw one, and it was the three female comedians, the hosts, Wanda Sykes and Amy Schumer, and the other one. They're all making jokes about Mitch McConnell. They say something to the extent of, yeah, this year was tough. There's a whole bunch of horrible toxic masculinity. Yeah, thanks a lot, Mitch McConnell. Imagine if Mitch McConnell was sitting in the audience and his wife was with him, and his wife noticed that Mitch McConnell was visibly perturbed by that joke. Would it have been okay for Mitch McConnell's wife to walk up on stage and just deck Wanda Sykes in the face and walk back and yell obscenities? I have a feeling that there would be a different reaction.
Yeah, and as you mess around with the different actors involved here and skin colors and ethnicities and that, you see a different social outcome. But I think that it's important to be anchored in the law and say, look, whatever the result is, however Will Smith should be treated here, it shouldn't matter what color skin he is. It shouldn't matter the sex of the person involved, the aggressor or the victim. And I think that's what rational, reasonable, civilized people advocate for. We shouldn't tolerate anything different.
Yep, I agree. Anything else to say on this, Mark?
I think that, it's yet to be seen what happens with this case.
That's true.
What about predictions?
Yeah, well, the prosecutor does have up until the end of the statute of limitations to bring it. And keep in mind there's something else at play here, which is that the private association of the Academy gets to decide what happens to that award, the Best Actor award, as a result of this. And they're still deliberating right now.
And
They're
of course,
doing a full review.
Whatever they decide is up to them, right?
Totally.
They have no obligation to do anything, or they could do anything they want. They can say, look, we're going to take the Oscar away. We're going to eject him from the club.
It's interesting because we have a private organization that's analyzing the situation. We have a public organization that's simultaneously analyzing it.
So I'm going to make a prediction on the public side. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I think he's going to be charged. And I think I think he's going to be charged because I think it would be very important for the local prosecutor, whoever that is, whoever's making the decision right now, to say, you know what? Whether you're rich or poor or black or white or famous or not famous or male or female, you don't get to slap somebody because you don't like what they said, and we're going to bring a misdemeanor charge. Now, to be fair,
What I would expect at that point, if that does happen, what I expect at that point and hope that would happen is he wouldn't be treated any differently because of his fame and fortune.
That's the point I was just going to make.
Yeah. Usually people get a diversion agreement for this.
Yes,
kind of a thing.
I have had the occasion to represent people who were in different positions in life, and they do get treated differently. I've had several high-profile cases, as have you, and they are treated differently in high-profile cases. So on this point, even if Will Smith gets charged, he shouldn't be treated one bit differently. Just to break down what a diversion is, basically says, look, and there are a couple different varieties of diversions out there, but it basically says, look, go to anger management counseling, stay out of trouble, do this, that, and the next thing.
Maybe release a public letter of apology to Chris Rock, which he's already done, by the way.
Yeah, right, something like that. And you know what? We'll just dismiss the case.
Right. This is exactly the type of resolution we would expect if we were defending somebody in a simple misdemeanor assault case who doesn't have any priors, who has never done a diversion before. And I don't know if Will Smith has a criminal record. I assume he doesn't.
There might be something out there years ago.
There
might be something kicking around years ago where he was aggressive, but it's probably too old. And we would certainly make the case that it shouldn't matter at this point.
It's a way ancient.
Too old,
prior.
yeah. So it'd be nice to see him get treated exactly the way the people we represent get treated, in a scrupulously fair way, without any regard to color of skin or sex. That would be my preference. However anyone else would be treated in this situation is how he should be treated.
That's a nice legal analysis, but you got to remember too that there's pragmatic things that are weighing on what could happen too, and a main motivating factor might be for a young prosecutor out there to try to be public and make a name for themselves and be motivated to exercise their discretion and bring it because maybe they want a little time in the limelight. As we've seen a whole bunch of high-profile trials in the last year of not only celebrities but people who gain celebrity status, and these people become characters in a movie for many of us. We see them performing in the courtroom, so who knows, maybe there's an ambitious prosecutor out there who might bring it for the wrong reasons.
And those are the kinds of prosecutors we don't need. So as we've said, we want to call balls and strikes here. Our position is simple. At least speaking for myself, my position is simple. He should be treated exactly the way anyone else in his situation would be treated.
Do you think that they're going to make him give back the Oscar?
I don't know. And frankly, I'm not sure that would be my position if I was running the private organization here, because it's sort of an unrelated thing.
It's a totally unrelated thing.
and I think that maybe he doesn't live up to the standards of perfection, but nobody does. And I do like that he came. It was a little bit late, but he did come out with an apology, and it seemed heartfelt. And again, we got work to do on apologies in our world today, right?
Mm-hmm.
If somebody delivers a sincere, genuine apology and is committed to reforming their conduct moving forward, maybe we should accept that and move on.
There's, of course, a lot going on, too, and we're not psychologists, but everybody knows that the Smith family has a whole lot going on in the public life, and there's a lot of drama there. They have an open marriage, which is, an agreement between them, but apparently Jada has violated even the agreement in terms of their open marriage and gone places with people without telling Will, and unfortunately for the family, it's all just extremely public, and so there's probably maybe some mental health issues at play here. There might be some psychological trauma. There might be some PTSD. It's always a recipe for disaster when you grow up living the intimacies of all of your private details in the limelight. So there's probably a lot of that going on as well.
I think that's about everything there is to say on this incident. Maybe we'll do a part 2 and we see what happens.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you very much for tuning in today, guys. That's our take. This is attorney Andy Marcantel and attorney Marc J. Victor. Until next time, peace.